I know that I'm on a camera because I'm in the preview monitors in the control room, and I know I'm on camera, but I'm ticking like crazy. I'm not embarrassed by that, but I do try to get them out before that red light comes on, and then I'm on the air.
Hey, it's Ben. I want to say thanks so much for all the kind words and messages as Hurricane Florence barreled in and made a total mess of my state. We took a pause from the podcast last week so we could get ready here and remove all the porch furniture and make sure we had enough, non-perishable food and water and fuel and whatever else we needed, batteries to get through whatever we needed to get through. We were definitely as prepared as we could be, and then, Mother Nature always ends up playing the last card. I don't even know if that analogy makes any sense, but yeah, it was crazy, especially for the coast. Again, I live in North Carolina. Thanks all of you for asking. We're okay here. We didn't really think we were going to be, but we're okay. Just keep in your thoughts all the people who are definitely not okay. It's certainly a reminder of how quickly things can change. So I'm definitely fortunate, and thanks again to all of you who checked in here and asked for updates. Okay. Have you or have you not joined the Tourette's podcast discussion group on Facebook? Sophia has done an amazing job as the administrator, getting everything off the ground and welcoming new members. I'll have a link to the discussion group in the show notes for this episode at tourettespodcast.libsyn.com, or you can find it pinned to the top of my Twitter profile. The handle is @Tourette'sPod, or I guess you can just look it up on Facebook. I just joined the discussion group myself, seeing as Facebook took my account down, my personal account down, thinking I wasn't a real person. So I made a brand new profile, and I'm now a member of the discussion group. All I had to do was request permission to join and then answer 3 quick questions to kind of qualify myself. And I became a member. Please join me there, and please tell Sophia thank you for being the point person for the discussion group. Again, it's a place where we can talk about the podcast or talk about our experiences with Tourette Syndrome, ask questions, which you can also send to me, tourettespodcast@gmail.com, in text or voice memo format, such as,
"Hi, Ben. My name is Carson. First of all, thank you so much for everything you've done with the podcast. It's been really helpful for me over the last few months. I'm 27 and I realized that I have Tourette's just this year. I haven't been diagnosed, but I do plan on going to the doctor sometime soon to get an official diagnosis. I was thinking about the question that you asked a long time ago and it's come up a few times since then of would you go back and get rid of Tourette's in your life if you could? When you asked that question, I said absolutely yes. But you and your guests talk about Tourette's as if it's more than just tics. It is creativity, it is musicality, which I did major music, so I do fit that bill. And it certainly seems to be the case and the trend with your guests. I am very new to all of this, so I thought it was interesting when you guests started talking about Tourette's and OCD and ADD and ADHD as being almost interchangeable and linked together. And maybe nobody has the answer to this, but are these technically separate conditions? I know not much is known about what causes any of these, so it's hard to answer that question right now, but are these 4 separate conditions? Or are they one and the same with little tweaks and facets about them that present themselves differently in different people? Or does it work one way or the other? Like, does Tourette's cause symptoms that are very similar to OCD and ADD and are therefore labeled as those conditions? Or is it all just Tourette's? And does it work the other way also? I've done a little bit of research on this and I haven't been able to find a whole lot. I found a couple things here and there saying that, it's hereditary and that they do occur commonly together in people, but not a whole lot more or deeper than that. I do happen to have all 3. I was diagnosed with ADD around middle school, and I do exhibit a lot of the traits of OCD also. But I just thought it was an potentially interesting way to think about it and potentially approach research as if they might be the same condition that presents itself in different ways, depending on the person. I thought Tourette's was just a physical thing at first, but if it is more than that, if it is a part of my personality and who I am on a deeper level, then no, I would not change that. And I don't think my family and my friends and my wife would want me to. So again, thank you so much for everything you're doing. I just joined the Facebook page, and there's lots of good discussions going on there already. So I know a lot of other people appreciate it also. So thanks, Ben.
Thanks for sending that in, Carson, and thank you for joining the discussion group. Carson sent his question and thoughts as a voice memo. That's my favorite way to get questions. But what do y'all think? Christine Conalia, if you're listening, maybe you can help to answer Carson's questions, or anyone else who's close to the science of Tourette syndrome and other diagnoses that sometimes run together. I will say, non-scientifically, just anecdotally, solely from my experiences, Tourette's is definitely more than what you can scrape from the surface. It's got tendrils all over my brain, or at least I assume it does, and it doesn't seem separable from my personality, or at least in how having Tourette's kind of shaped how I engaged with my surroundings, and that in turn shaped me as I grew up. I know I'm not answering your question specifically, but I do know we have people in the audience who can, or at least better qualified to. So everyone qualified, please weigh in. Or if you're not qualified in the scientific research sense and you have some thoughts about this, chime in. The Facebook group is a great place to do it. And again, Carson's a member, so he will see what you say. Before we get to our conversation this week, I want to read another email I got. The subject line is Tourette's Superhero Comic Book, and it comes from someone named Fisher Lee. He says, "Hey there, I'm working on a comic book about a superhero team, T-Man and Hyperstrike. T-Man can tap into all the strength and skills of everyone in the world with TS, and Hyperstrike has ADHD and has built a suit of armor that helps her channel and focus all her extra energy. This whole thing is geared at uplifting and encouraging the next generation of kids with TS and help them focus on all the things that make them awesome." So that was the first email I got from Fish. He goes by Fish. And he sent a link to a Kickstarter page to support the project and its printing. I'll have that link in the show notes with this episode at tourettespodcast.libsyn.com. And so I wrote back thanking him for sending that in, but then Fish said that he was pumped that I had planned to interview Ed Buckner, his local TV weatherman, who has Tourette syndrome, which was highlighted on his TV station. They ran a special about Ed Buckner. Your weatherman has Tourette syndrome. And so Fish told me the following. Before his special on TV, my neurologist had diagnosed me as, quote, faking it for attention. It wasn't MS, it wasn't Huntington's, and I didn't swear, so it couldn't be TS, his official word. Then they did a special about someone on our team, on our news team, has TS. And everyone from church called me and said, this guy on TV looks just like you. I checked it out, and sure enough, there was this guy just thrashing around and talking about TS, and how it wasn't just swearing, etc. That finally convinced me to get a second opinion, and my new neurologist spotted it as soon as he walked in through the door. 30 years of this mystery illness was gone in an instant, because Ed had the bravery to speak out. He didn't have to. He was mild enough. He could have gone through the rest of his career without telling anybody. It was a big deal. So that was Fish's email. That's awesome. I mean, that's why accuracy in awareness is so important, because it will help to change people's lives positively. And that brings us to our conversation this week with TV meteorologist Ed Buckner.
My name is Ed Buckner. I'm a TV meteorologist in Little Rock, Arkansas. I work for THV11. It's a CBS affiliate here in Little Rock. I've been here about a little over 22 years. And before that, I worked at various TV stations in East Texas. So I finally found a home, and this is my home now, and just love it here.
Nice. So is that general region of the U.S., is that home for you, or did you come from somewhere distant?
Well, home is Houston, Texas. So from the big city. Grew up through lots of hurricanes, unfortunately, we're talking about that now everywhere, but lots of hurricanes and floods and
knocking on the door.
Big old mosquitoes and roaches that fly and humidity, that kind of stuff. So I spent probably 28, 30 years of my life born and raised in Houston, and then I went to college in East Texas at Stephen F. Austin State, and then ended up getting a second degree with meteorology later on in life, but that's part of my long, convoluted story. But yeah, I'm from Houston, and moved here in 1996, which is only about a 7-hour drive from Houston, so not bad.
So yeah, I mean, why meteorology? I mean, we could kind of build up to that, but just the timeliness of me talking to a meteorologist as we're talking right now, it's September 11th. Hurricane Florence is kind of churning off the coast right now. I mean, meteorology. What's the origin of that for you?
You're not going to believe this story. You might think, and a lot of people would assume, that I grew up wanting to be a weather person, or I grew up fascinated by science and meteorology. Yeah. Actually, the truth is I'm the biggest introvert you'll ever meet. And when I was in high school, I would sit in my room and write poetry and play guitar and try to write songs like my favorite artists of the time. And when I was in high school, I thought, well, I'd rather get paid to play music. So I wanted to be a disc jockey. So I majored in radio, television, communications, got a Bachelor of Arts in communication, and wanted to work behind the scenes in radio, television. I didn't want any part of being on camera, seriously, and that's the last thing I wanted. But so you could see the story gets a little interesting down the road, but started working in radio, and then eventually got a job in television, not making a whole lot of money, and going from market to market, running camera, but I was happy as I could be. I mean, there was one year where I unloaded trucks at Sears in the warehouse Monday through Friday, and I worked at the TV station Saturday and Sunday, and there was a whole year that went by that I didn't get a day off. But I didn't care. I was so happy because I had one foot in television, and I was trying to get hired on full time. Right. So one thing led to another, and I started working behind the scenes at different TV stations, and I was actually in Houston as a studio operations technician, adjusting lights and running camera and helping the anchors know which camera to look at during the newscasts. And I was adjusting the lights at the weather wall, and I didn't want to waste the weather girl's time because she would have just had to stand there. So I was standing in front of the weather wall, and I was adjusting the key lights and the back lights and the fill lights. And as I was standing there, I was just kind of messing around, like talking about the rain and the weather, and these clouds are going to dump a lot of rain here, and it's going to be dark tonight and light tomorrow, just being silly. But the weather girl said afterwards, she goes, they're not going to let me off for Christmas, and we don't have a backup weather person, and you look like a natural. You should audition and try out for that job. And I'm like, there is no way. I'm not going to be on TV. Those people have egos.
Yeah.
And my mom said, Edward, you have to try this. You cannot go without saying you at least tried this. So the next day I showed up in a suit and auditioned for the weather, and this was in Houston, Texas, which was market number 10 in the United States, and 4 million people, and Christmas Eve, 1990, I'm on TV doing the weather. So it just kind of happened, and one thing led to another, and I ended up going to different markets and different jobs, and I had to go back to college to get my meteorology certificate to learn a little bit about what I was actually talking about to make it a little bit more viable and credible. So that's kind of my story. So I kind of fell into the world of weather, but I have always had an interest in science and music, and I'm good at a couple things, but not really a master of any of them,
Well, it's funny. I mean, I can totally relate to what you're saying about being an introvert and not wanting to be on camera. So my journalism background is with newspapers, and there's a bit of radio in there too, but still, it's not kind of me being visibly in front of an audience. And there was a time period where, in my capacity as a newspaper reporter, I would have to go on, and this is reporting legislative politics in the capital city of North Carolina. So there would be TV shows where, the host would be like a roundtable type show where the host would want to have a journalist and an expert and, that kind of thing. And that was frequently me, and I could not stand it. And it was the kind of thing where everybody's kind of nice about it, like, oh, you did great, but I always felt like I just looked stupid, and I was not prepared for, what was coming, and it was kind of a deer in headlights kind of thing. And it was just kind of, I was very squirmy. And so I felt really, really at home just kind of writing and kind of being in that tight little newsroom where, it's my byline on what I'm writing, but I feel good about it. I'm kind of working a little bit at my own pace, even though it's deadline writing and all that. Radio is a little nerve-wracking. Especially if it's live radio, because you and I were kind of talking off mic before this call about how if you say it live on the air, it's out there. There's no taking it back. There's that button you can hit to kind of censor yourself. But there have been times where I'm positive that my Tourette's has kind of tripped me up when I had weird breathing tics, and I just kind of wonder what everybody's thinking when they're listening to me or seeing me, and I guess that for anybody unfamiliar with you and your work, I mean, I'm sure they got to be wondering if you're ticking on the air when you're doing weather.
Oh, yeah.
Do you, or?
I get that question, probably one of the most asked questions.
I bet.
For some reason, Ben, I don't know. I'm able to hide it. I'm able to hide it you keep in mind the weather generally is 2.5 to 3.5 minutes long, depending on your weather story, what the news is. And of course, then there's the 4 to 6 to 8 hour tornado extended coverage days, which is a whole other story. And I tick so bad, the stress. But most days I'm on the air for 2.5 to 3.5 minutes. And if I do have a tick that's really strong, I'll just step off camera.
Yeah.
I'll step off camera and I'll hyperextend my right arm or my right leg. I get most of my ticks out in the 2.5 minute commercial break right before weather. Okay. I know that I'm on a camera because I'm in the preview monitors in the control room, and I know I'm on camera, but I'm ticking like crazy. And fortunately, and we'll probably get to this later, but the staff here at the TV station knows that I have this. Most of them have been with me these 22.5 years, and they just know that's just me. So I'm not embarrassed by that, but I do try to get them out before that red light comes on, and then I'm on the air. So I am able to hide them just a little bit. Well, no, I'm able to hide them pretty well, actually, when I'm actually doing the weather.
What about the audience? I mean, is it just kind of an out-and-about fact that the local weatherman has Tourette Syndrome, and how is that regarded?
Well, I guess I kind of need to start at the beginning, sort of.
Yeah, let's do that.
To tell that story, and I kind of want you to lead me, but I just don't know. I mean, back in 2007, I'm going to start there, and then we can back up to my childhood if you want later. But in 2007, my wife had the great idea. Said, "What if we went public with this? You could help a lot of people." And pitched it to the management at the TV station at the time, and they were very supportive and said, "We love it." And our head female anchor did the story, and she interviewed my neurologist and interviewed my wife and interviewed my family and showed childhood pictures, and I explained on the air in 2007 that I have Tourette syndrome. And this was on YouTube or Google for many years. I don't think it's still on some of those places, but my story's out there, and got nothing but positive feedback from it, and stacks of email. I mean, I'm talking 2 inches of a stack of emails that I got from viewers saying, "Oh my gosh, my husband might have that, or my son has that," or anything like that. Just kind of snowballed. And there was the off chance, the very slim off chance that was brought up that, well, you're a trusted person on the TV news, you're trusted to bring us weather information. Do you really want to let out that you have a neurological disorder? And I'm like, well, that's a no-brainer. There's no, I'm me, and that's me, and I think I can help more people than anything else. And it was so widely accepted, and I can't tell you what a blessing that was to be able to go out and help people, especially school children, and teach these schools about acceptance. I mean, that's kind of been my mission ever since. Yeah.
So, I mean, is that something you do frequently? How is that facilitated? And do you talk specifically about Tourette syndrome, or is it just more about the concept of diversity and acceptance?
A little of everything. When I go to talks, it's either about weather education, teaching children how to be safe in the weather, and talking about high pressure, low pressure. And I even write songs. I write weather songs for kids. And they're also out there on the internet, on our Facebook and website. But I mean, like Puffy the Cumulus Cloud and Mr. Twister. And so I write these weather songs for children, and I really love playing my guitar for school children. But most of the time I talk about school weather safety. But I get a lot of requests from school teachers, and I've traveled all over the state of Arkansas, which you might think is small, but trust me, some of the corners of the state, it's in the mountains. It's a good 2.5, 3 hour drive to go to some of these schools. But I'll get an email from a teacher or a phone call from a teacher or a parent and saying, I have a student with Tourette's, and he or she's being bullied, and they really could use a talking to and some help. And I'll go to that school, and I'll meet with the parent of the student beforehand and make sure it's okay that student comes up with me at the end of my presentation. So I'm kind of backtracking here. I do two main talks. Either I'm asked to do weather talk, or I'm asked to do a talk about my Tourette's and or disabilities. Which I'm going to say right now, I don't call this a disability. I call it this ability. I have this ability to make a difference for people. So I don't like the word disability, So I've got an ability to make a difference. So, I'll get these emails and phone calls, and I'll travel to the school, and I'll talk to the students, sometimes the whole school, 300 or 400 students, and I'll talk about Tourette's, what it is. I have it, and I'm on TV. This didn't stop me. I have it, and I'm okay, and if you have it, you're going to be okay. We all have something. That's kind of my other mantra. Everybody's got something. If you're not suffering from cancer, or you wear glasses, or you're bald, or, you know what I'm saying? But we all got something. Divorce, abuse. There's all this stuff in the world that everybody's dealing with. And so this is what God allowed me to have. And then he put me on TV. So I'm like, okay, all right. So I'll talk to the student body, and at the end I'll bring up the student who has Tourette's, and I'll put him right beside me, and I'll put my arm around him, and I'll say, "We who tick together stick together."
Oh, I love it.
That's I say that. We who tick together stick together. And you know what I've heard after I leave that school? I've heard that kid has become the most popular kid in the school because he knows Ed Buckner, and Ed Buckner has Tourette's, and he has Tourette's. And it puts a whole new light. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's what I love. That this is something that can be something to be proud of. It's different good. It's, you have abilities that come with it. It's not just like, you have tics that come along with Tourette syndrome. There are other things that may, there are things that bug me about the Tourette's I have. That they're in no way currency to trade in terms of, living life without it and being the kind of person I would be without Tourette syndrome. Even though, when I was a kid, there are plenty of times where I'm like, God, I'd do anything to not have this anymore, to get rid of these tics, to stop being a freak, or however I viewed myself that I want to run away from and not be. And it's just, it's so funny how easy it is for me to view it now, looking back and being like, there are so many good things that came out of this. So many, even if I was just totally hiding it, and especially now, just all the people I'm meeting who have amazing stories, amazing abilities, and not in some way where I feel like we have to kind of like reach deep to find them. It's very much on the surface for so many people that I've talked to. They're all impressive. They're all smart. They're all creative. They're all, musically inclined. And it's so important for, kids to hear that message and for their parents to hear it too. Because I do get a lot of emails from parents who are, kind of worried about the future of their kid. When you were a kid, there's the segue. When you were a kid, when did you start showing signs of tics, and how did you kind of negotiate those things socially before you were kind of open about it, and did it maybe manifest bigger later, or what was happening?
Well, let me start by explaining. I'm 53 years old. Okay, so that tells you that when I was developed the tics, it was in the middle to late 70s, and back then there weren't a lot of labels for people being thrown around. There were you don't have Asperger's syndrome and autism and ADHD and OCD. There just wasn't a lot of that labeling going on, which I benefited from. So I was probably 12, 13, and I had an eye tic where I would blink my eyes a lot. I'd sniff a little bit, and it's funny how you talk about it, you start doing it. But,
yeah.
So let me get that out. Okay. So I was 12 or 13, and my mom was concerned. She took me to the doctor. The doctor walks in. What's the problem? And I'm like, well, he has this eye tic or whatever. And he goes, oh, that's just a nervous tic, and turned around and walked out. Now, I laugh at that because that's been a blessing to me. What if, we need to order neurological testing, and we need to do this and do that. And so I left the doctor's office and, it's a nervous tic. I don't know what that means, but that's just who I am. And I went to a very small private school and played soccer and did drama club and played in the talent show. And all of my friends, there weren't, again, a very small school, probably 108 in my whole senior class when I graduated. But they were all like, oh, that's just Ed. He just fidgets a lot. That's just Ed. So there was no stigma. There was no labeling. There was no walking around with a label on my forehead that says I have Tourette syndrome. There was none of that, which ended up working in my benefit because I didn't know better. I didn't know that I had something that might prevent me from going into broadcasting. I didn't even think about it. I'm like, I'm going to do what I want to do. And all these doors were open, and God led me to where I need to be, and now I'm able to make that difference. So that's kind of, I never was diagnosed as a child. So it was just like, oh, he just has nervous tics. And I can remember on the soccer field, my right leg would fly out from under me and my right arm, and everybody was like, oh, that's just Ed, you know?
And so when I became conscious of the sort of stigma part of Tourette syndrome, I had already been long diagnosed. I was diagnosed when I was a little kid, but it's sort of when I started, kind of looking at the world with bigger eyes when, I was maybe 13, 14, and then seeing these sort of comedic portrayals of Tourette syndrome on TV. That's when I became aware of the stigma. It probably existed before that because TV writers and, the joke was there, but that's what made me kind of turn inward and kind of flee from it. And, it's just, it's just a better social plan for me to lock this up. And, I'm going to grow up and nobody's going to know about this and that kind of thing. Just kind of shamed into it. When were you diagnosed and when did you sort of become aware of how maybe greater society viewed Tourette syndrome from a kind of a parody point of view?
Sure. Again, I think we have a little bit of an age difference between us, and I can totally see your side of the story. But with me, I grew up and went to college and had kids and was doing my thing. And in 2001, my mom passed away, and my tics got real bad. And I always, how you've heard so many of your guests say, kind of always knew it, but just never was officially diagnosed. Something like that. I kind of always knew that that's what it was. Yeah. But so my mom passed away, and my tics got real bad. The stress of that life change was really hard on me. And I remember in 2002, one of my family members, I think it was my sister-in-law, that said, they make medication for that. And I'm like, really? I didn't even, again, I'd never been officially told. And I'm like, well, I don't know about that. So then I went to the neurologist, and sure enough, I've got mild to maybe at times moderate Tourette syndrome, and here's all these medicines. And I heard you mention in your episode 0, I believe, about what you took, and they put me on some of the same ones, clonidine and Haldol, which was horrible. Haldol is just, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
oh
did
my
not
gosh.
do well with
Let's
that.
talk about lethargic and depressed and gaining weight. And so I was on all these medications, which didn't do a thing. They just put me in a deep, dense fog. So to answer your question, long answer, I was officially diagnosed in 2002. Tried medications for about a year. They were very detrimental. Decided I'm just going to tick. I'd rather get rid of this fog and this depression. I gained 60 pounds on those medicines, and then I got depressed. So then I had to go to a psychiatrist about my depression. It turns out it was all the medication snowballing, into just being not who I was. So medicines didn't work. Slowly started working out, lost a little bit of weight, and the fog finally lifted after about 2 weeks of being off those. So I was diagnosed in 2002 and thought it was a good idea to come public with it in 2007. And so people to this day will email me and say, oh, I heard you have Tourette's. Can you come talk to my school? So the word's still out there, and it's not a secret. That's kind of, again, like I said, my platform to try to help people teach acceptance.
What is kind of in practice the message that how are you able to communicate that and have that kind of cut through the stigma or the joke that people sometimes kind of accept Tourette syndrome as being?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think my transparency and the fact that I'm on people's TV every night, I think that goes a long way. That you don't have to fight as hard as somebody who's not in the public eye. I mean, when I come into a room, everybody knows who I am, and I talk to them, and I have people come by the TV station all the time with I'm talking about severe tics. I mean, and I just can totally relate to them and empathize with them and say, it's okay. I mean, you're around me. It's good. And I'm able to just calm them somehow and explain to them that, We all have something, and I'll try to calm them and say, what are things that you're interested in? What do you want to do when you grow up? And just kind of make it about them and make them feel okay in their own skin. So I don't know if I answered your question right, but I have a benefit of walking into a room where people already know me and kind of know a little bit of my story. But the stigma of how the movies and the jokes and all that stuff is portrayed, I've never devoted one iota of time or care or interest in any of that. I think it's horribly unfortunate and it's wrong on so many levels, and there are a lot of people that are disrespected and made fun of because of that stigma. But with me, I just have not had to deal with that side of things as somebody who may not be locally known.
I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying about Jaleesa in the first episode of this season, is that she just approaches it very positively and very honestly. And, and basically she just takes it as far as that. And the people who can't be on board with that, it's, what are you going to do with them? She's, I think, very inspirational in that regard. And you are too. And the reason I kind of asked it that way about, how do you kind of cut through this specific kind of stigma? Because Tourette syndrome is kind of regarded, in a different way from other things that people have. And a lot of these things are, kind of sacred topics and, very much not okay to make a joke about at all. Even with friends who, are the kind of people you would joke with, just off limits topics. But Tourette syndrome is always still kind of floated through as the thing that's still...
It does seem to be kind of that one area of focus for a lot of people. But when I do these talks, not just the Tourette's talk, but I've been keynote speaker at disability conferences where there's all kinds of disabilities, and it's not just Tourette syndrome that's mocked or
You're right. Yeah.
that misconception is out there. So many different ones, and that's when I go back to everybody's got something. I mean, let's ease up, people. Let's just love each other and accept each other. I mean, you may be dealing with something I'm not, but I mean, just be kind to people, So that's kind of what I try to preach.
That's powerful, and especially if a kid ends up being kind of the hero of the class after being associated with you. I mean, that's amazing. I love that.
It's huge. No, it just warms my heart. Now would be a good time to make sure that I let you know, and I thank, my family, my friends, and all the support I've had, this TV station. You know what I mean? I mean, they've been totally supportive. So I have not run into a lot of confrontation about it. I mean, my family, my wife, my kids, I mean, that's just me, and you had mentioned in one of your episodes that sometimes you just got to laugh. I mean, sometimes you just got to joke about it. And, I'm okay with that. I do that quite a bit. But not when, of course, I'm trying to help a student or a young person with their self-esteem. But there's some times at home where my wife will go, now, where'd that one come from? I think that was from 1982. It just kind of came back. So that's in my house right now. My most frequent tic at the moment is basically the first one that I remember having. It's just one that's just kind of come back to haunt me, and I do kind of laugh at it just because these things come out of nowhere. I can't explain it. Wait, where did that come from? What was it? Was that a tic? My wife always says that one thing she loves about my tics is that when we're in a store, grocery store, wherever, she always knows where I am. she can always hear my hack or my cough or my sniff, and it makes her feel good to know that I'm in the aisle next to her, or I'm close by, or something like that. So, and I also sometimes do what you mentioned. I apologize sometimes. I have a really loud, hacking cough tic. It's really annoying. And when I do it next to her, I always apologize. And she doesn't need me to apologize, but I just feel like I need to because it's so probably disruptive to her. And it's so loud that I have an office downstairs at the TV station, and there have been people in the offices upstairs that can hear me doing it. So it's that violent and that harsh of a hack that it's even hurt my vocal cords. And I've had a lot of physical ailments from the years of ticking.
When you started kind of opening up about your Tourette syndrome to your coworkers, did that kind of answer some questions for them, or did they have any sort of suspicions or anything like that?
That's a great question. I don't think it opened up any answers. I think they all knew. I think I think everybody knew. I mean, I was just the fidgety guy. I was the fidgety guy off camera, and when I was on camera, I tried to calm it down. And I think, no, I mean, that's what I mean. I want my family, my friends, and the TV station has always been nothing but supportive. The one thing I do sometimes kind of am concerned about is the new employees that come. We have a lot of young, talented journalists and reporters that come into the station, work their tails off for a couple of years, and then move on. They don't know my story. So, and it's hard to meet a new person and say, "Hey, welcome to Channel 11. I have Tourette Syndrome." That just doesn't. You don't do that.
Right.
But sometimes, if I have an opportunity and I have a bad tick in front of them, I'll say that. And I go, "Really? What's that?" And so that's so.
No,
again,
I think you got it right. I mean, I think that's kind of the trick, because that's something, since I've sort of opened up about having Tourette syndrome, you may be around people who are sort of influential in your line of work, or they're, the boss is in from out of town, or it's a new employee, or that kind of thing. And it's really unnatural feeling to say, "Hey, I'm Ben, I got Tourette syndrome. If you see me do this." And I guess, I could see that working on some level, but it's also a little bit, I think, maybe overwhelming and too much to process at once for a person who, is just kind of showing up on the scene and is green to you as a person to begin with. And so I think I think you're doing it the right way and that helps me out, because I've kind of been wondering about this, is like, when is the right time and how do I do it? And it's maybe if I do an awkwardly loud tick or something that's just so blatant where you can tell that they have the question on their mind. And maybe that's when it's the right time to say, that's my tick. I have Tourette syndrome. I'll do that sometimes. And, no big deal. Just want to let you know. Yeah.
I remember you had a guest recently, maybe have been the last episode, a nice lady from Canada, and she had an employer that said, "Oh, it's not so you don't shout obscenities or anything like that." And that was offensive, but I've never had that happen. And going back to that, I also make sure that my head honchos, that the general manager of the TV station, whenever we might get a new one that comes around, I always want to take them to lunch or sit down with them one-on-one to explain that I have this, because I think they need to know, the news directors need to know, and of course all my friends and co-anchors, they've known for 22 years. But whenever we get a new manager, they need to know. But I don't go around just telling people, "Oh, nice to meet you. I got this." And then that goes back to the story back in high school, that I got so tired of asking about my sniffing that I was just like, "Yeah, I've got a cold, whatever, it's allergies." But that didn't last very long. I started telling people as an adult, "No, I've got Tourette's." And when I do tornado coverage, when we get severe thunderstorms in Arkansas, they are nasty. They get bad. And I'm required to be on the air, communicating effectively, quickly, with urgency, without alarming people, and tell them where the tornado is, where it's going, what's it doing, what they need to do to seek shelter, to stay safe. And during that course, sometimes it's been as long as 6.5, 7 hours. There was a day in 1999 we had 56 tornadoes on the same day in Arkansas. And throughout the course of that, of course, the stress makes the ticks worse, and I'm sniffing and I'm sniffing, and I'm trying not to sniff. And now that Facebook's around, and our viewers are communicating with me on Facebook saying, "What's wrong, Ed? You got a cold? You got allergies? What's going on?" And I'll just answer them after the storm, and when I have time to respond to them, I'll say, "No, I have Tourette syndrome, and I can't help it." And then they're all like, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Oh, I've heard of that. Oh, well, you do a good job." So it just kind of turns them around.
Yeah, that's so. I mean, so stress is one of the quote unquote triggers for you. Is there anything else that seems to kind of inflame your tics?
I knew this question was coming. Here's I've got it so bad at times. Let me answer it backward. The times I'm not ticking are when I first wake up, because I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I've been still for 5 hours." It feels so wonderful. Yeah. Or when I'm sitting in my rocking chair on the front porch watching the birds, or when I'm strumming my guitar. But the minute the minute, Ben, that I stand up to do a task, any task, whether if I'm standing up to go put my shoes on or I'm standing up to go make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the minute I stand up, my right arm or my right knee hyperextends, it flails out, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to try to walk to the kitchen without doing something. And it's virtually impossible. But if I'm sitting still or when I first wake up, those are the times where I'm most at peace. So it's not just stress that makes them bad. It's going to do a task. It's like right now when I reach for my mouse and my computer. Well, that task-oriented movement, I don't know. There's an association with it, and I need to try to figure out a way to disrupt that behavior modification somehow. I don't know what I need to do, but my tics are pretty bad anytime I'm moving. You know what I'm saying? But if I'm sitting still, if I'm just sitting still listening to music, or the minute I wake up, I love the minute I wake up because I feel at peace for a few minutes. But the minute my feet hit the floor, I'm wailing and frailing, and it's like, come on. Very frustrating. But stress does make it worse.
Well, have you found anything along the way that does seem to kind of mellow things out? I mean, we had talked about music a little bit earlier, and I definitely want to find a way to segue into that. But what's, do you have anything that you can kind of go to that does kind of relieve you or just feel like a tick-free zone in a way? Or
no, I really don't. I really don't. I mean, anytime I'm in motion, the urge is there. There are things that make it worse. Fluorescent lighting, grocery stores, retail stores, department stores, they all have those fluorescent lights. It makes like my skin crawl. It makes me very irritated, and I'm snorting and coughing and all kinds of stuff when I'm at the grocery store or whatever. I mean, it's hard for me to grab an item off the shelf without moving. Stress, bad weather, tornadoes. I mean, so I haven't really found anything that helps. I just sit as long as I can sit still and breathe. Listen to my music. Even when I play guitar, sometimes the tics are so bad I can't get the first few chords out. I'm like, okay, I got to get these out first. Yeah. And sometimes in the middle of a song, I'll snort or cough, and I'm like, well. But when I performed at a band, I didn't notice myself do that as much. So I don't know. It's something about me performing, being in front of people. I don't do it as much when I'm in front of people, but the minute I get to my car after talking to a group, it's like, look out.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. When I was performing, I don't know if I'm so not a scientist when it comes to Tourette syndrome. I just know my own experiences, but I don't know if it was just some sort of adrenaline offset or what. But I wouldn't tick on stage when I was playing, but if I am just kind of sitting here, I've noticed it's gotten worse as I've gotten older. But for example, I just pick up my guitar and I start strumming it. My tics will mess with my rhythm when I'm trying to just play, just play a straight rhythm on my guitar, or when I'm playing drums or something. There's something about my tics that will throw off my rhythm, almost like my Tourette's wants to interfere with it and always sort of finds a way. If I'm hitting the snare drum, it's kind of off a little bit and it kind of drives me crazy, and I stop and I want to kind of get through a whole, set of measures with that. That's the goal of getting, because I record a lot too. And with digital recording, there are ways around it to make everything sound perfect, but it definitely messes with my rhythm. It messes with my breathing when I'm trying to sing, especially if I have this anticipation that, okay, there's this change coming up, or there's this part coming up that I got to nail and get right. It's almost inevitable that I'm going to mess it up. That wasn't the case when I was younger, and maybe more of a confident person.
Well, I can so relate to that because I used to record. I'm going to 100% assume, I guess that's not an assumption, I'm going to say you're a little bit more tech savvy than me. But I did record. I haven't recorded in 8 or 9 years. I had a Korg D12 digital recorder, and I just didn't know how to use it very well. I didn't know how to edit or punch in and punch out. And the way I would record is I'd hook up my microphones and get my acoustic set up, and I'd start the song, and as luck would always have it, at the end of the song, I'd hit a bad note. I did not know. I did not have the tech savvy to know how to go in and just hit that note again and edit it into the song. So I'd start the song all over again. And that got to be pretty tedious. And I'm like, please don't tick. Please don't tick. I'm almost through. And it would always be the outro that you're thinking, okay, I've almost got this. It was perfect,
Always,
so I don't record anymore. I do the simple thing, and I'll put my phone up, and I'll play a song on YouTube and post it that way. So I don't do a lot of recording. Who listens to CDs anymore anyway? So it's like but I have a bunch. I've probably written about 6 or 7 CDs worth of original material. But I can totally get what you're saying. I mean, you're strumming and you're in a pattern, and it messes you up. It's like, well, but when I was performing it, I didn't notice it as much.
How long have you been playing guitar?
I started when I was 13, about the same time my tick started.
Okay.
So that's 40 years. I'm not great, but I love it when I can focus on it.
There are a lot of people listening who are musical, music savvy or music appreciators, songwriters. I mean, there's a couple other people that I have interviews in the can for already this season who they do the same thing we're doing. They record, and music is a big part of their life. And actually do get a lot of emails about, like, music seems to be a common denominator with a lot of your guests. Like, is there something more to it? And I'm like, I guess so. I don't know. I mean, music is a big part for a part of my life, and that does seem to be a common denominator with a lot of people.
It does.
I've
noticed that or art. I mean, I know a lot of people that are just really gifted with art.
Absolutely, yeah. There always seems to be this sort of creative proclivity or a technical I'm definitely not the math side of the brain. That's not me at all.
Neither.
It's all the creative side. But what kind of guitar do you have?
You mean guitars?
Of course.
You can't just have one guitar. I mean,
no.
Can't do that. I have to explain that to my wife all the time. I mean, no, there's one that sounds this way and one that looks this way. So I've got a Guild, an old Guild six-string acoustic, and I have a Seagull 6-string acoustic. Both of them made out of different wood materials for different tones. One's a cedar top, one's a spruce top, and nice. I've got 3 electric guitars. I've got a 1980 Gibson Les Paul Standard. I've got a Fender Telecaster, and I've got a Gibson ES335 Custom Shop. So those are
nice.
Those are my 5 guitars. I spend more time looking at them than I do playing them. But what do you have? Tell me what your gear's like.
So I've gone through a million guitars, and right now I definitely have I have a junkyard of guitars here. Some of them are these old Japanese knockoffs of Les Pauls, Les Paul Juniors, Studio Les Pauls. The one I play most is a Gibson SG that has this sort of fireburst kind of finish on it. I love it. It's amazing. It's the second one I've had. But my favorite guitar. Okay, so I got to go through this story really quick. My acoustic is it's a Martin Sigma guitar that was made in. It's a beautiful black guitar. It was made, I believe, in the 70s. It says made in Korea, which I can assume to be South Korea. And I got it when I was, I think, maybe 14 or 15. And I got it, basically my dad and I bought it together. He plays instruments as well. And so I was a complete moron. This is around 2001 or 2. And I left it in my car in a parking lot in this apartment complex overnight. And sure enough, I come back and the window's busted out and the guitar is gone. And my heart sinks and I'm like, oh my God, like this is just, it was my guitar, it was my dad's guitar too. It's just, I had to call him and sort of do the shameful phone call of telling him, hey, your guitar got stolen and it's my fault. And just so much guilt. And police came out, they basically said, like, we're not going to find it. You might want to look on eBay. You might want to look at pawn shops. But I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's lost forever. And so occasionally, maybe once every other year, I would go online and just look on eBay or just kind of, just see what's out there. It had some very distinct features on it that felt kind of one of a kind. And it had some battle scars on it that were absolutely one of a kind. Again, me being a moron, a soldering iron that I had touched it. I was working on one of my guitars. Soldering iron touched the top of this acoustic guitar, and when I picked it up, it took a bit of the lacquer with it, so it has a scar on it. And so I would be able to identify it anywhere, basically, based on that mark and a couple other things I had done to it. And so I'm looking online. This is about 4 years ago, I guess. And I find
Don't tell me.
I see a picture of it. It is my guitar. It is the exact one. And it's on Google Images. And so you can click that button that says visit site. So I clicked visit site, and it takes me to an active eBay auction. And I'm like, I just immediately started crying. I just lost it. And I was like, that's the guitar. That's my guitar. That's my dad's guitar. And so I emailed the seller. I sent a message to the seller, and I was like, I'm not trying to shake you down, nothing like that. It's just, I know for a fact that this is my guitar that was stolen from me a long time ago. I just, I'm not trying to say, give it to me. That's my guitar. Give it to me for free or anything like that. It's just, I just have to tell you this. And the seller was basically like, oh, crazy. Well, and I guess, I don't think he really knew what to say. I think he just didn't want to give it up. And that's fine, because I didn't expect that. But
yeah.
So I told my fiance, and I was like, look at this. And there's like tears running down my face. And I'm like, look at this guitar. Guess. This is my guitar.
Let me guess. And she got it for you.
So I come back one day, and she had bought it. And so I have it back now. And
your baby's
it plays
back.
Exactly. It smells exactly like I remember it. It plays exactly like I remember it. And so, yeah, it's definitely under lock and key right now. But that's my guitar story.
It's about those sentimental things sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not the best playing guitar I've ever had, and far from it. But I mean, it's priceless to me.
That was my first real guitar. It was a Sigma Martin in the late '70s. That was my first, quote, real guitar, other than from the Sears catalog kind of guitar.
It's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Thanks for sharing that.
It's still, it's one of these like unbelievable sort of. I still have the business card of the police officer who took the police report, and I carry it around with me in my wallet.
It's a story that a true guitar fan can appreciate. That's for sure.
Man, but so when you post videos, I mean, is that generally how you kind of traffic your music? Is you put them up on YouTube, or have you done albums or anything like that?
Well, I've done homemade CDs in my room. In the early 2000s, I did a lot of that. I haven't written a lot lately, but I find that as a little bit of an escape to try to write lyrics. I just never come up with the catchy melodies for them. But no, I don't quote try to push my music. It's more of an outlet for me. I could care less if anybody sees them or if anybody really comments on them. That's not why they're there. A couple of them I'm somewhat proud of, and I've posted them on my YouTube channel, but they're not to make money. They're not to get fame. They're just an outlet for me. And it's my hobby. I'm not, the weather is great, but sometimes you got to get away from the weather, so that's my outlet. So no, there's no rhyme or reason to why I do that. And to be honest with you, there's probably only 6 or 7 YouTube videos out there, and they're probably 8-9 years old already. So, so no, it's just something I do, and some people tend to like, and I enjoy doing that.
So this is the other question that comes up a lot too. With your wife, and you kind of explained some of this already about kind of presenting to the world that you have Tourette syndrome. But could you kind of reiterate maybe some of the initial conversations, and even when you guys met, did she pick up on tics, and could you tell that it was something that was noticeable to her, and did she have questions or curiosities, or it's just something I'm always curious about, and you can shut me down if that's too personal.
No, not at all. That's always a great question, and I've heard so many of your guests with different stories on that. Unfortunately, mine's not very exciting, and there's no real cool story here. I was very, obviously, as I've mentioned, transparent with it, and I think there was no big build-up or no, hey, sit down, I got to talk to you about something. There was none of that. It was it was probably me snorting or making a cough or sniffing one time, and I said, oh, by the way, I think I've got Tourette Syndrome, but I've always been this way, so don't let it freak you out or anything. And she's like, oh, that's cool. That's it. That was it. So it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the takeaway is that it's just kind of, you can just kind of say it, and most of the time, people are going to get it. And I, earlier when we were talking in our conversation, I was kind of probing the negative parts of it and the stigma and the kind of treatment, the unfair treatment and all that. But since I've opened up, I mean, I've experienced none of that. I'll still see the joke, in sort of a pop culture setting, but that's just kind of something that exists to me. Exactly what you said earlier is just, I'm not really giving that the time of day. I hate it for the people that it does bother, but with me opening up about it and kind of telling my story, it's been nothing but, it's been positivity all around.
I'm glad to hear that, Ben, and you've done a great job adapting to that, because I know your backstory a little bit and how you kind of hid that. And so, isn't it freeing? Isn't it freeing just to kind of be out there and say, hey, this is me?
Yeah, it feels so much different. I mean, it's just this sounds really cliche, but the whole pressure release thing of, I feel fine walking down the street and ticking, and, if people notice it, I know they're not going to be thinking about it an hour from now. It's nothing that's disruptive to anybody else or me. And, and there are people who have more severe tics who were able to do it the same way and have the same experience. And we've said this on the podcast before too. It's just a lot of people are just kind of very focused on what, they themselves are doing in the moment and not much around them. A lot of people are kind of, whether it's looking at their phones or listening to music or, with their earbuds in their ears or whatever. Yeah. And I'm not criticizing that. That's just in explaining that people are not necessarily focused or concerned with me walking around and ticking. And if it's something that does bother them, I don't really care. It's just
exactly. You can't. I don't have time. I don't have time to waste my emotion on what they may think. And you're right. I think a lot of us, some of us, not me, but some people may be hypersensitive, and that everybody's staring at me. Well, the truth is they got their own lives and they've got their own concerns, and I don't think we're that much under the microscope all the time. And that's why I just let it all out. When I'm as I mentioned, grocery stores, retail, it's bad. But I mean, I frequent the same stores, and I think everybody knows me and they know my story, so it's different for me.
Right.
And I have no problem sharing it with people. I mean, that's not to say I don't get tired of it, and my body doesn't hurt, and I've had physical ailments from the tics, but still, it's what we have. That's what we got.
And thinking about just kind of letting it roll off, and I'm not really bothered by it. I know it may be kind of different for the 13-year-old kid who's really trying to kind of establish himself or herself socially and make friends and impress people, and there's a lot of anxiety and the prospect of being made fun of, and I get that, but it's just I think that's where people like you come in and kind of change that conversation and change the game. And these are the people who are interesting. They're not people that you make fun of. They're, they got something about themselves that makes them interesting. And otherwise they're as cool as you are. It's just, if not cooler, that's just such a beautiful takeaway.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh. I appreciate that. But no, it is a beautiful takeaway. But me and cool, those two words don't quite go together. but no, I'm very lucky. I'm blessed. I'm beyond lucky because I don't have to fight that stigma as much. I mean, I've been, like I told you, people know me. I've been in their homes for a quarter of a century. So I don't have, but the 13-year-old going through adolescence, trying to find friends, that's tough. That is tough. I mean, people are throwing around labels left and right these days. And we haven't mentioned this, but I've probably self-diagnosed myself as having a touch of OCD, a touch of ADD. I can't watch movies. I can't read books. I feel like I'm wasting my time. My microwave always has to be a double-digit number, like 411 or 422 or 333. And so I've got all these little idiosyncrasies about me. But could you imagine being a teenager and just trying to fit in, and with the labels that are thrown around, and, oh, you've got ADD, you need to be on this medication, or you've got OCD, and you've got Tourette's, and it's like, come on, growing up is hard enough.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just the luckiest guy in the world, really. So to be able to do what I do and to have this and to be able to teach acceptance, I mean, are you kidding me? That's wonderful.
Man, I mean, is there anything we haven't hit here, or anything that I've failed to ask in the course of this, or anything that's kind of bubbled up that we haven't touched on? I mean, it's just been so great.
So I appreciate that. And there's just one thing, and I don't know how much time you have left, but I've mentioned how the tics have affected me physically. And in one of your episodes, you had mentioned something, and I can't remember how it went, but you were doing something, maybe sniffing, and the doctor walked into the office or something. Well, I had a bad ear infection about 10 years ago, and I went to the ear doctor and treated me for the ear infection. He looked in my right ear and said, your eardrum's collapsed. Did you know that? And I'm like, no, I hear perfectly fine out of it. He goes, well, you're not going to for much longer. I'm like, okay, well, that's crazy. Was it a loud guitar and when I was a teenager? What caused my eardrum to collapse? And sure enough, 2 or 3 years later, it stopped working. And he performed inner ear surgery, and it didn't really fix it. And so then I went to a specialist, and I'm sitting in the room, and the doctor walks in, and I'm sniffing, and he goes, oh, you're a sniffer. And I said, yes, doctor, but I don't have allergies. I don't have a cold. I have Tourette Syndrome. He goes, And this guy was so astute. He goes, so how long have you been sniffing? I said, about 38 years. And he said, okay, so you've created this pressure on your eustachian tubes, and that's caused your eardrum to collapse. I'm like, oh. So he rebuilt it with a titanium little connector and rebuilt my eardrum out of cartilage. And while my hearing's not totally back, it's about 60% back. And I thought, well, that was pretty sharp with him. And so the constant sniffing has caused my eardrum to collapse. I've had several joint surgeries. My joints are very loose and pop. My neck is really in bad shape. The doctor looked at it and said, you look like you've been hit by a truck from all the neck twitching that I've done over the years. So I live in a state of pretty much constant pain. It varies in intensity, but I hurt a lot. And so that's why I enjoy, I guess, sitting around. Probably not the most healthiest thing for me to do, but sometimes I just have to stay still. So the physical toll that Tourette's has had on me has been somewhat significant, and I was a little bit surprised at my age that I feel way much older than I actually am. But, again, shrug it off, and you wake up every day and you keep going.
Yeah, I've had a lot of thoughts about that, especially about my ears and kind of how that relates to music and my enjoyment with audio to begin with, and my ear popping tic, which mainly just lives in my left ear. I've definitely had to go to the ear doctor to get checked out, and I mean, so far I'm doing okay, but I kind of feel like that is going to lead to something at some point.
Hopefully
it's just that's the one I worry about. It does give me a headache. It does make my neck hurt. It does kind of, I'm still not to the point where I would entertain medication again, because I'm happy with everything else. I don't want anything else in my life to kind of change in that regard. But it is interesting what you were saying earlier about feeling like you're wasting your time with, books and movies. And I'm that way with sleep. I don't necessarily sleep great anyway, except for the past couple of years. I've been sleeping okay, but I don't like the act of sleeping because there's always something I want to be doing. There's always something I could be doing, or I have an idea that comes up, whether it's for a song or whether it's just a project that I want to start working on. There's always something like that. And I feel like sleep is kind of my enemy in the way. And it's the one that's always going to get me. I have to bow down to it at some point.
It's interesting. But yeah, to me, it's the opposite. Sleep is my best friend. I just can't get it. I struggle. I tic. I'm in bed. I feel like I'm bothering my wife, and I'm twitching, and I'm clearing my throat, and I'm like, calm down, and I can't calm down, and I just can't sleep well. I probably get, on average, 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night, unless I take a sleep aid, and then I have to take one at 2 in the morning to keep sleeping, because I just wake up. So sleep is one of the few times that I feel at peace, when I'm still. So I love sleep. I just can't get it. And you're saying you're kind of the opposite. You don't want to go to sleep because you got so much going on in your head. But the stuff going on in my head keeps me up until I finally calm down eventually.
Has that been a lifelong thing, or is that something that's kind of swelled up in your adult life? Or
I'd say it's swelled up in my adult life, mainly in my 30s. And I hear a lot of people say that their tics get better with age. I'm going to say mine are probably getting a little bit worse with age. And I don't know why that is. That is. But I'm thinking they're getting worse, and the sleep is getting harder to come by. And there's pain, and then you're taking the Advil PMs, and you're like, geez, I'm not this old, really? But,
right.
but I certainly feel it after a long day, that's for sure. But we all do something. We all carry something like that. And again, your podcast is just phenomenal, and thank you again for doing it. I mean, this is just another great venue to kind of release the stigmas and to learn about acceptance and just, hey, it's okay. This is what this is. This is who we are.
Thanks for listening. Please head over to the Tourette's Podcast discussion group on Facebook to weigh in on this episode, and I'll gather up some of your comments to read on a future episode. Which, by the way, the next couple episodes will be pre-recorded. Well, all of these are pre-recorded, obviously, but I'll be out of town. I'll be in Europe for a couple weeks, getting married to my amazingly supportive better half, Ambrose. She and I are going to be all over Western Europe, and so I've got to upload and schedule the release of these next couple weeks worth of episodes in advance of that. So if there are any, world-changing events or anything like that, I won't be talking about them on the podcast because I did all my recording and editing ahead of time. Okay, you guys get it. Tourette'sPodcast@gmail.com or Tourette'sPod on Twitter. I'll be in touch. Thanks, Ed Buckner, and thanks to all of you listening. This is Ben.